Hi, today I wanted to talk about Chinese colophons, more specifically colophons in the Dunhuang manuscripts. Because the Dunhuang manuscripts are the largest corpus of material that survives from medieval China. That is, in terms of manuscripts. And the colophons to these manuscripts give us insight as to why these manuscripts were copied, what people used them for, why they produced them. And so it's really worthwhile to look at these colophons because we get answers, or at least some answers to these questions. Why did these manuscripts come to life? And I guess here we must make a difference between people who read Chinese and don't read Chinese. First, I will look at the manuscripts from the point of view of people who don't read Chinese. These might be people working on other languages, such as Tibetan or Old Uyghur or Sanskrit or other parts of the Buddhist world. And so for this, the most important source are several articles by Lionel Giles, the keeper of Chinese manuscripts at the British Museum. So we know that the Stein manuscripts were deposited in the British Museum after Stein shipped them from China. And over the years, Lionel Giles published several of these articles specifically talking about dated Chinese manuscripts in the Stein collection. So he translated them and arranged them into a chronological order. So these articles begin from the earliest period, and here we see the first installment. So he's talking about manuscripts from the 5th and the 6th centuries. And it's really useful just to read through these colophons and see what they talk about, because then you have an overall image in English of what they were about. So here's an example. So this is manuscript S81, and it's dated to 506, the 5th year of the Tianjian reign period. And it's a copy of the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, so the Ta Pan Nie Pan Jing. And we can read the colophon in original Chinese as he read it, and then his translation. Here we can see that this particular manuscript, which is very well produced, was copied by a lay Buddhist person, and this happened in the Bamboo Grove Monastery in Jingzhou in Hubei province. And the reason why he did this on behalf of his deceased father, praying that all sentient beings of 7 previous incarnations might speedily ascend to the Dharmaraja realm of fearlessness, prepared for him by the Bhikshu Senglun and Kong Hong Liang. So there was a lay person, and he seems to have hired these 2 monks to prepare the manuscript for him, so probably even copy the manuscript for him. So his primary motivation for copying this was on behalf of his deceased father. And all the sentient beings of 7 previous incarnations is just an addition to this. So he was basically paying for the copying so that the merits would benefit his probably newly deceased father. So this is a commemoration of the dead kind of copying. And here's what this manuscript looks like. You can see that it's really well done. Even the paper is very nice. It's not just plain yellow or brown, but has an interesting texture to it, even in terms of its color. And here's the text of the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. There's this end title. Closing this section, it says this is from the 11th Juan, and then we have this very nicely written colophon. Quite interestingly, before the name of the father, so it says deceased father here, we have an empty space. And this kind of empty space is a sign of reverence in manuscripts. It was also used later in print culture. And here's another example. This manuscript dates from 689. So we know that this date corresponds to the reign of Empress Wu Zetian, who established her own dynasty, interrupting the Tang for about 15 years. So here the colophon says, in the 12th moon of the 4th year of the Chuigong reign, Madame Qi, that is a woman of the Qi clan, the wife of Wang Lin and a Buddhist disciple of pure faith, has on behalf of her deceased daughter reverently caused a section of the Fa Hua, that is the Lotus Sutra, to be copied, praying that the deceased, as well as all living beings in the whole universe, may together achieve Buddhahood. So obviously the motivation here is the death of the daughter of this person, and she is copying this text in order to gain merits that would benefit her deceased daughter. And as usual, she also adds that she's doing this for all living beings in the whole universe. So this is not about personal salvation, it's to the benefit of others, and this others can be actually a very wide range. In this case, literally everybody. And this is what this manuscript looks like. So you can see this is Dunhuang 2, so volume 2 of the Lotus Sutra in Kumarajiva's translation. And the colophon is written here at the end. And here's an enlarged image of the colophon, and we can see that the handwriting is actually quite different from the text of the sutra, which is written very, very nicely, and the handwriting is somewhat less neat. So it was probably written actually by this woman. And quite interestingly, the same woman also appears in another colophon, written a few weeks earlier, and this is manuscript S791. This is volume 3 of the Lotus Sutra. And there we have a very similar kind of colophon written by the same woman. And this is what the colophon says. In the 11th moon of the 4th year, the wife of Wang Lin, a Buddhist disciple of pure faith, being afflicted with a chronic disease, has reverently caused a section of the Fa Hua Jing to be copied, in order that this act of merit may benefit all beings endowed with consciousness, and that all may attain the fruits of Buddhahood. It's the same person because she identifies herself as the wife of Wang Lin. She does not identify herself by her own surname, Qi, as in the previous manuscript. And in this case, she seems to be talking about her own illness. So she's very ill, and that's why she's copying this text. So basically, these few articles of Lionel Giles go through all of the dated colophons, and there are quite a few of them, and translate them into English. And if you read them together, it's actually touching to see what kind of real everyday problems people had. So they often involve death or illness or wanting to go home or travel or something like that. So I would recommend everybody, whether you read Chinese or not, to read through these because it's very, very interesting and also gives you an insight to the sort of daily life and the concerns or problems in people's lives at the time. And I would definitely also recommend this descriptive catalog of the Chinese manuscripts from Dunhuang in the British Museum. It's also by Lionel Giles. And in this case, he goes through all of the manuscripts. So these are not only the colophons to the dated ones, but all the Dunhuang manuscripts at the British Museum. This catalog is arranged according to the structure of the Buddhist canon because Giles quite correctly recognized that this collection in general is a Buddhist collection. So it actually made sense to arrange it in this manner. So if we look at particular examples, then we can see that there are many manuscripts which only merit a single line of text because there is no other information on them other than the text. But if there is a colophon, then Giles actually goes and translates the entire colophon. So here we have this example of the Prajnaparamita Sutra, so the Bore Polamito Jing. These are fragments, and there's a colophon, and he translates this colophon. He says, copying completed on the 19th day of the first moon of Gengyin, the first year of the Taiyan reign, by the Bhikshu Shenzong of the Southern Shrine at Yiwu. Actually, it shouldn't be Yiwa, it's a typo, it should be Yiwu, which is Hami, where the Hami melons come from. A clumsy man with the pen. It was hard to obtain paper and ink. So in this case, we don't see the actual motivation, only see the name of the person who copied the text. And at the end, he also adds these snippets of his personal circumstances, say it was hard to obtain paper and that his hand is not very neat. Oh, here's another example, and in this case, it's the Guanshi Yin Jing, so the Avalokiteshvara Sutra, which is the 25th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. And in this manuscript, we read that on the 15th day of the first moon of the second year of the Tianzi Wansui, so this is also during the reign of Empress Wu Zetian, the Buddhist disciple of pure faith, Yin Si, copied out the Guanshi Yin Jing in one roll on behalf of his parents now living and his parents of 7 previous incarnations, as well as on his behalf and that of the multitude of living beings in the universe. So in this case, the copying is done for the sake of one's parents and also previous ancestors. So the living parents and the ancestors who are already gone. Now, this does not really tell us what was actually going on, whether the parents were getting ill or they were getting close to the end. But basically, the concern is about the parents. It could just be that the copying was done for their benefit, so they may live longer and healthier. And interestingly here, the numbers in this catalog are not the Stein numbers. So the Stein numbers come at the end. So if you want to find this manuscript, it's actually S217. These numbers are the numbers Giles assigned to these, and they represent the sequence in this catalog. So later on, nobody has been really using these numbers. So everybody still retains the Stein numbers. So you should also use that if you want to reference this manuscript. And this is what the manuscript actually looks like. So you can see this particular kind of handwriting. And because it's so particular, it's quite obvious that the colophon is written by the same hand. In the colophon, it's quite noteworthy that you have these special character forms which have been used during the reign of Empress Wu. So in this case, the character Tian, heaven, has this particular form, and also Nian for year, and Zheng Yue, so both Zheng and Yue, the first month, and then also Ri, day. So these characters all have this particular form, which normally allows us to date the manuscripts, but it's of course not always the case. But in this case, the colophon specifies the year when the manuscript was copied. And if you read Chinese, then of course you have many more resources to look at colophons from Dunhuang manuscripts. So the most important of these is the collection of ancient Chinese colophons by the Japanese scholar Ikeda On. So in this collection, colophons are called shikigo zhiyu, which is a Japanese term for the colophon. Theoretically, this is not just the colophon of Dunhuang manuscripts, but all sorts of other manuscripts from pre-modern China. But in reality, because most of the manuscripts from this long period actually come from Dunhuang, 80% of this collection is about Dunhuang colophons. So it's a very, very useful source, and I would definitely recommend to everyone. This is how they arrange. They're arranged chronologically. And so here's an example of several colophons. Let's look at this one in the middle. This is the Sifen Lu Zhao Vinaya. And so this part is the title given by Ikeda. And below he writes that it's undated and it probably comes from the end of the 6th century. And then he records the colophon itself. And the colophon says that this was copied by this person, Sun Lue, who was like a village elder at the Taixing monastery. So only this one person, Sun Lue, is referenced, and the other people remain unnamed. We can find the Stein number, so this is S1415, and some bibliographical references as to who's written about it. So he's mentioning, for example, Giles. So G refers to Giles. So Giles has already recorded the text of this colophon. And this is what the text looks like. Ikeda dates it to the end of the 6th century, probably based on the calligraphy, which seems reasonable. So this is either during the Sui dynasty or approaching the Sui dynasty. And the colophon itself actually is not at the end as usual, but at the beginning of text. So this is where we see it. And again, it's in a different hand, or rather we should say that it's written differently, because we can't tell for sure whether the text of the sutra is written by a different person. It's definitely written in a different kind of script. Copying the sutras, usually people used sutra copying hand. And then for the colophons, even if it's written by the same person, they would have used something more ordinary, something more resembling their actual handwriting. And this is what this text is in Giles' catalog. See the whole scripture reverently prepared to the order of Sun Lue, village elder, and 30 others at the Taixing monastery. He already says that this is a fine manuscript from the 6th century. So because this was published in the late 50s, and Ikeda On's collection of colophons was published in the early 80s, it's likely that Ikeda On took this dating from Giles. And Giles would have probably not been that familiar with the calligraphy. It seems that he's dating the manuscript on the basis of the paper, because he's looked through thousands and thousands of original Dunhuang manuscripts, and at the end, I guess he developed some kind of feeling for the type of paper that was used in different periods. So you can see that it's a beautifully done manuscript, and this is the sutra copying hand. So this does not necessarily represent anybody's personal handwriting. Just like in Western culture, you had a specific kind of handwriting to record court cases that was learned, and it didn't represent anybody's handwriting per se. And you can see a little bit of red here in the background. And that's from the other side where we have this one line of text, which is Oral Stein's Chinese secretary, who usually added this number on the top. So this is one of those suzhou numbers used in accounting. And he usually added the title that he saw on the other side. So here he writes that it's from the Luzon. And going back to Ikeda's collection of colophons, let's look at this other example. So in this case, we have this funny business with the colophons. He says that it comes from the 19th year of the Zhenyuan reign, and then also from the 3rd year of the Tianfu reign. So it dates to 983. This is a manuscript from the Paleo collection, so Paleo Shinoa 3036. And the text says that in the 19th year of the Zhenyuan reign, on the 23rd day of the first month. And xia probably refers to afternoon. This is a text called Quan Shan Jing, the scripture of advocating goodness. And this is what it looks like. And at first sight, the colophon is actually written by a different hand. So the hand we see on the manuscript is not a sutra copying hand. It's just somebody's own handwriting. But the interesting thing is that we have two colophons. So one dates to 803 and the other one dates to 938. And we can also look up other copies of the same text in Dunhuang, and we can see that we have similar colophons there. And this colophon is also dated to the 19th year of the Zhenyuan reign. And Ikeda thinks that it's actually the 29th day. But he's probably wrong because this is what the manuscript says, and it actually works well with the other one. And then you have another copy of the same text, and it has the same date on it. And what actually happens here is that the first date seems to belong together with the text. So it was probably copied along with the text, and it's the second colophon that specifies the time when this particular copy was made. Here we can look at another example. So it says a Buddhist scripture with the colophon, and this is again from the Paleo collection, and this is what the original manuscript looks like. And again, we have two different dates on it, and we usually have to work out what the dates mean. Is it the case, as in the previous sutra, that the first date was copied with the text, which doesn't seem to be the case here, or what else is going on here? And of course, there are many other resources to look at the colophons. So you can look at, for example, at the French catalogs of the Paleo manuscripts, which also describe the manuscripts in detail, and sometimes they include the colophon or translate parts of it. And then there are descriptions of the Russian manuscripts by Lev Menshikov. These are written in Russian, but there's also a Chinese translation. So if you don't read Russian, you can read it in Chinese. Unfortunately, there is no English or other version. So Menshikov also did a catalog of the Chinese part of the Khara-khoto collection, and that includes quite a few colophons as well. This is an example from the Chinese translation of Menshikov's catalog of the Dunhuang manuscript. Okay, so this is my short introduction to where and how to look up colophons of Chinese manuscripts from Dunhuang. As I said, there are, of course, quite a few other resources in Chinese, and there is an increasing amount of research about particular colophons, about this manuscript or that manuscript. And if you're interested in these, then you should look at them separately. But then we shouldn't forget that there are also manuscripts in Tibetan and also in Old Uyghur, and the colophons to these are also just as important. So let me know what your experience has been with working with these colophons, whether you can find them easily or which resource is the best for finding them. Put your comments in the comment section below, subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching, and see you next time.